But starting, I guess, with how you ended up coming to Glastonbury. Sam touched on it already, but what brought you there and what did you do, apart from not pay?
Not pay anybody, actually. Look, my experience of festivals began in the late 70s, early 80s. I was actually here before it was Glastonbury. It was a Green Gathering or something. And then I spent 10 years living on the road through the 80s. And there was free festivals for me, which were the forerunner of the free parties that you bumped into. And festivals were a place to bump into like-minded people that you know shared the same kind of ideals, and together we explored ideas around food choice, around alternative energy, different ways to live, that kind of stuff. It was a real melting pot of ideas and stuff like that. And come the early 90s, I dropped back in from my decade on the road trying to build a big windmill. And I'd been aware of what Sam and Jean were doing here on the Greenfield. And I remember I made them a sketch. Right, I sketched this thing. It was a 60-foot tower. I said, I'm going to build this from a scrapyard, like Pip. I've spent a lot of my time in scrapyards. I'm going to build this thing with train batteries at the bottom and a windmill on the top, and I'm going to sell phone calls, right? This is 92, maybe, something like that. Mobile phones had just entered the world. They were like this big, and you carried them like that. And it was a brand new idea. And Sam and Jean, they just said, yeah, go for it. So I did. They never mentioned rent or anything like that. I would have paid, I really would. But everybody thought it was a crazy idea that it wouldn't work. Like, who's going to want to make a phone call in the middle of a festival? I can tell you, we were queued 4 people wide, because we had 4 phones, and 20 people deep for the whole weekend. It was crazy. And everybody said the same thing. They all came along and they said, hello to whoever they're talking to. Then they looked up and they said, I'm calling you from a wind phone, and I don't know what happens when the wind stops. It was just a patented a whole weekend. And it was great fun. And that gave me the chance to make the money to build this first windmill in Stroud, which led me to build Ecotricity, world's first green energy company, then a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's my potted history in festivals.
That was a very short summary. Not only did you build Ecotricity, but in between that phase, you spent another 10 years on the road, didn't you? I know you're going to be speaking about the Battle of the Beanfield later. But just to kind of draw a thread from your festival experience, and then how much further has it gone since then? You've been in the political realm, in media, you've worked in phones, food, Sky Diamonds. Do you think that there's been a reverberation from this culture out into the mainstream?
Yeah, so when we come to this question of like our festivals, the birthplace of the Green Revolution, I'm going to say actually yes, to a degree. And if not the birthplace, then maybe the nursery, right? This is where the ideas were kind of given airspace and were shared and stuff like that. So I spent the 80s on the road, and I spent the 90s trying to build a windmill and a green energy company. And then in the 2000s, I moved into transport and food. Energy, transport and food are the 3 things that make 80% of all of our carbon emissions. And so that became my mission from the early 2000s, to build Britain's first electric car, first national network of charging points actually in the world, stuff like that. Then rescued Forest Green Rovers, turned it into the first vegan football club in the world, and created a process to make diamonds from atmospheric carbon, all kinds of other stuff along the way. I'm just having a kind of wild, adventurous time. You know, if I'd have imagined it 20 years ago, I might have thought it was like a trip or something like that. You know, I might have woke up and thought that's never going to happen. But this is happening right now. And I also have this platform. I get the chance to speak to the media about the green economy, the green revolution, that kind of stuff, talk about energy independence, how that's good for people actually, and how we talk about this stuff is like super important. Instead of talking about ice caps and polar bears and the climate crisis, we've got to talk about jobs and the economy, because that's what appeals to most people. How we get our energy bills down, how we keep them down, that's energy independence, that's green energy. And the climate crisis for me is like icing on the cake. It's the thing to put behind your main argument, which is that it's an economic thing. Green now is an economic thing. Back in the day, as Sam said, people used to laugh at it, but they don't laugh at it anymore.
Who's laughing now?
Yeah.
It is clear that there is an influence of festivals on the green revolution. We know that we've still got a lot of problems right now in the world, and that sometimes they seem like they're getting bigger, if not smaller. So with your experience, with your perspective that you've got in each of your cases, what do you think needs to happen next, or your perspective of the next steps? Are they good as they are? What would you like to see happen through festival culture into the green revolution? Sam?
Well, it's a difficult time at the moment, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of, There are countries who are being run by complete idiots. And yeah, so, you know, I think we've got a big role to play. I mean, in my experience, having people coming over from different cultures to experience Glastonbury is a really great thing, because that really does send the ripples out to across the world. And okay, you can argue, you know, you're spending money on air miles, etc., to get people over here to the festival, but I think if people pick up on things, like in the 90s, we met some very interesting Japanese people, and they brought the first peace flame over to Glastonbury, and we were asked, well, some of us, well, I was asked to go over to Japan and kind of spread the message a bit, and I was fortunate to go to the first Fuji festival in Japan, and they had the first renewable energy stage in Japan. So you know, that element of teaching what can be achieved from festivals, from green festivals, can ripple out to the world and have a positive effect. I think it is, you know, it's tricky. It's tricky now, because we're all we're insecure. The world is insecure, so we've got even more reason to try and teach the world.
Pip, your thoughts on, I know that you're still creating new worlds and venturing out into the wider world as well. So how do you see the best use of your tools, experience, in order to make positive changes?
Yeah, we've really thought about this a lot. And like I said, it was quite amazing last year seeing the momentum we've got behind actually bringing to the surface the idea of repurposing technology and creating these works of art, and the sort of momentum that we have managed to create with that, and the unified feeling we've had with that. I'm very aware of all the conflicts happening around the world. We actually got talking to a guy who'd made quite a lot of money through creating VPNs to go into war zones. So when the government tried to block out the internet, he created technology where he could go around the world and make sure that people could still access the internet, which would be a real peacekeeping thing, because it meant whatever the government was up to would still be exposed globally. His funding's just been cut now by the Americans, sadly, but we got in there just before, and he funded our company for 2 months to work out how we could develop what we do, to not just do things in places like Glastonbury Festival, but to go into post-conflict zones around the world where people really do need to rebuild their cultures and communities, and go in and work with communities to build sculptures from repurposed military stuff within their communities to then put on events.
Zones around the world, there are desolation is being created. Cities are being torn to bits and desolated. You know, we all know the war zones. We all know what's happened to the humanity in those parts of the war zones, those parts of the world. And at some point, we're going to have to rebuild some of these towns, these cities, and a lot of new knowledge is going to have to come into it. A lot of green principles are going to have to come through, and you know, if we really want to survive as a species, as humanity, then we have to take those principles forward. And you know, a lot of those principles we're seeing around us now, we should be taking out and rebuilding the world.
And Dale, your final thoughts before I open up to the floor?
About the role of festivals?
Yeah, and also the Green Revolution, which I think is what you live and breathe, and any reflections on what these guys have said.
Yeah, so two things maybe. I think festivals are like a place where we bring people out of their comfort zone, out of their normal lives, where people become more receptive to different and new things. I've seen that all my life. It happened to me first as a teenager. So I think festivals have a great opportunity to influence the behaviour and the thinking of the people that come here to Glastonbury or some other festival. It doesn't really matter. It's a chance to present new ways of thinking, new ways of living. In terms of sustainability, it's about food choice first and foremost. I think it's actually the biggest thing. We have to stop eating animals. It's the only way we get to bring back wildlife and fight the climate crisis and the human health crisis as well, actually. Energy is a thing, right? Getting diesel at festivals, I think that's important, but it's not the biggest thing going on in the world right now.
Because you have all made a massive difference individually as well as with the people that you've been working with. And thank you for joining this panel. And thank you to everybody here, Sam, Hermitage, Dale, Vince, Pip, Rush. Big round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.